Good morning, everybody. I was just waiting for people to come in. Hopefully you are getting ready for towards the end of the year, and your thoughts might have turned perhaps to perhaps moving position or getting interviewed for a promotion or something like that. And so today's Career-puccino, so I hope you've got your coffee ready. I've got my little rabbit mug today. Today's Career-puccino is all about how to answer competency-based questions. And if you're not sure what those are, don't panic. I'm going to talk you through that. So let me just pop up my chat. So if you've got any questions, do pop them in the chat as we go along. Just a little bit about myself, if you haven't been before. My name's Emma Williams. I've worked in and around the early career space for at least 25 years, career research space, and interviewing is one of those things that seems to bring out the nerves in all the people that I work with. So even some people you think, well, they wouldn't be nervous at an interview, they are. So preparation is key when it comes to understanding how best we can come across at interview. Everyone gets nervous, but preparation and understanding the types of questions you might be answered is absolutely important. So I run mock interviews with people time and time again, and they're always like, oh, I hadn't thought of that question. Are they really going to ask me that? And then the feedback comes back, they really did ask me that question. So without much ado, let's share my screen. So hopefully you can see that. Perfect. So we're going to talk about competency-based interview questions first off. So what is a competency-based question? It's not a word that we come across very often, is it? Competency. It's a bit of an odd one. But basically, what these questions are about is probing your past. So something that has really happened to you, and with a relation to the skills in the advert. So they've got a square-shaped hole that they're trying to fill. That square-shaped hole needs, teamwork, leadership, communication skills. And so they might probe those competencies or those skills through a question that looks at how you've dealt with them in the past. Now, a long time ago, people used to say in interviews, how would you approach this situation? And we can approach that situation in an almost perfect way in the future. We can say all the things that we expect that employer wants to hear, and we can almost be that perfect little team member for that person. However, that is not very helpful to either us as a potential employee or as the recruiter, because they are just looking at effectively a perfect person. And so what we're trying to do is probe the past, how you've dealt with these situations in the past. So some typical questions might be, let's have a look. Describe a situation in which you've led a team. So the competency, the skill that we're looking for there is team leadership. So describe a situation. Give an example of a time you handled conflict in the workplace. Again, that will be team roles, communication, dealing with difficult people. All of these are describe a situation. Give me an example of a time. So like I've said on this slide, you've got a story, you've got your backstory, and you need to be pulling out examples from that are useful to answer these questions. Some other examples might be, tell me about a time when your communication skills have improved a situation. Looking at communication skills, but also key to these questions is that positive bit at the end. So when your communication skills improved the situation. So all of these examples that we choose to answer with need to have that positive, happily ever after at the end. So it's quite key to have those wrapped into your answer. So, we can probably all think about, things where we think, I wish I'd said that, or I wish I'd said that. Those aren't the types of things that we need to use in interviews. We need to have good case studies, but thankfully there are some ways of structuring those very easily. So if you think, how would I even put that into an answer? We have two different ways of thinking about it. So one is the STAR framework. So I've got a little Christmassy twinkly lights for you because it is that season here in the UK. Or the CAR framework. So both of them are simple acronyms to try and help you think about how you structure your answer. So you've got experiences in your past, hopefully some that ended positively. And it's thinking, right, how do I structure this? I don't want to come across rambling in an interview. But equally, I don't want just a really short answer. These competency-based questions are probing you for a story. So you're looking at perhaps 2 to 3 minutes to answer this comprehensively. You don't want to go over that because people will get lost. Interviewing is tiring. And people will get lost. The story might make sense to you. Of course it does. You've lived through it. But we need the clear, relevant bits to your employer or prospective employer to come out in the answers here. So how do we answer them? So the first one is STAR. So STAR stands for situation, task, the actions, and the results. So you can see that it's very much a story framework. So the situation might just be telling the employer where this happened. So this happened when I was an undergraduate at Cambridge. This happened when I was working as a postdoc in the Brain Imaging Centre, wherever it might be. I've set the scene, if you like, and all stories set the scene, don't they? So that's the situation. You might want to elaborate a little bit more. And this is where T for task perhaps overlaps with situation. So you can naturally go into, so I was a team leader of a group of people, and our, whatever our task was, kind of the task is what you had to do or what the issue was. So if they've asked you about difficult people, you can say, this happened when I was working at the University of Cambridge. I was a team leader of a team of 12, and one of the team was feeling somewhat isolated in the team. This could be quite a good example. So that's my task. It's like, that's what I've set up. A is for actions, and these need to be things that you did because they're interviewing you. So don't talk about lots of things that other people did because that is irrelevant to your new employer. Thinking about what actions you took to improve this. So thinking about these competency-based questions. For instance, tell me about a time when you showed integrity and professionalism. I'm not interested in your boss's integrity and professionalism or lack of it. I'm interested in yours. So tell me about the actions that you took. And then the R is important. So we've got the situation, the task you had to do, the actions that you did. R is where this happily ever after comes in. So this is the good results that happened because you took those actions. So this little star, quite literally, is painting you as a star in this situation. That's partly why it's quite easy to remember. We can look at the CAR framework as well, which is just, there are acronyms all over when it comes to interview technique. But CAR is the context, the actions, and the result. So CAR literally takes that situation and task and wraps it into one. It doesn't matter which you use, so long as you step us through. This is why these are useful acronyms. There's no point jumping into the actions if we don't know where it was happening or why it was happening. So that's your S and T, or your C for context. The actions that you took add a realistic dimension to it, which is why we're asking competency-based questions, because we want to know how you dealt with something. And then the results need to be positive. So don't pick that example where everything blew up. Pick the example where things turned out right. So, a standard academic question could be, could you tell me about when you've worked with a student who struggled? So you can go through the situation and the tasks, the actions that you took to help that struggling student. And the result was that they got through their master's dissertation and it was marked with a distinction. Brilliant result. So you're tying that R bit is tying up your story in a bow. It's really important to have that positive. And you'd be surprised at the number of people who forget the positive. And that's really what a prospective employer wants to hear, is that, problems arise, and quite often competency-based questions are about problem solving. So can be necessarily quite have a negative slant to them. Whereas if you make sure that you focus on that R, that you've got the positive result, you turn it round. Okay, so thinking about STAR or CAR, those two things. It doesn't really matter so long as you tell a story. The other thing I would really emphasize is make sure that it sounds as natural as possible, which comes to practice, but also thinking, okay, well, I could do, I can talk about it in this way, rather than sound almost bullet point. So the situation was, the task I did was, the actions that I took were, the result was. Okay, everyone is going to spot that as the STAR framework. Talk about it more naturally, but make sure that you're not putting in too much extraneous detail for people. Okay. So how do you start answering these questions? Well, I'll come on to where to find them in a minute. There are competency-based questions all over the internet. You're not going to have a problem finding them. But what you do need to know is to start collecting those anecdotes. These are mini case studies, and you will have had plenty of things that have happened in your life so far that you can use for this. Don't forget that you can always use stories from outside work if they're relevant. So leadership, you might have thought, well, I haven't got that many leadership examples in work, but I have led a sports team. So I'm chair of an archery club. I would probably use that in some of my examples. So make sure that you start collating these stories. You don't want to be trying to think about them when you're staring your interviewer in the face. So thinking about, okay, difficult students, struggling students, go through your teaching expertise. Research projects are usually littered with brilliant examples of how you've, kind of turned a bad situation around, or all those sorts of things. So there are plenty of examples once you start thinking, but I would encourage you to grab that pen and paper or pop them into the spreadsheet of your choice, but start recording them. Make sure that you've collected these stories. If possible, try and map them across to different competency questions, which comes on to my last slide, which is how do we prepare? So first thing first, in your job description that you've applied to, spot the competencies. And these will be the things on the job description, the skills and experiences that they are looking for. Teamwork's always there, communication's always there, Ability to work autonomously is sometimes there. Research practice, all sorts of things can be folded into that great big long list. What I want you to think about is, as you go through, and I strongly recommend, she says, I can't find a highlighter at the minute. There we go, highlighter, nice yellow one. Highlighting all those skills and making sure they're in your application. And then when you are called to interview, make sure that you have spotted those competency questions that go with it. So, for instance, teamwork. Describe a situation in which you've led a team would be an obvious question. There are lots of lists of competency questions out there. Jobs.ac.uk, which in the UK is the academic job site, yes, has plenty of academic jobs, but also has a fantastic career advice section. And in that career advice section is their interview tool. Just pop it into the search and it will pop up for you. And their interview tool has some great questions. Tell me about a time when. Other sites, just pop in competency-based questions. If you know what you're looking for, competency-based questions, team leadership. Google is your friend here. In preparation for this, I came up with 5 or 6 different lists of different competency questions. And they are increasingly being used by employers. So I've had people go for jobs at big drugs companies, and they have explicitly said in the interview joining instructions, we will be asking you competency-based questions. We expect you to use the STAR framework in answering them. So they're being really explicit. So what they want is people talking from their experience rather than being that projected perfect being, which of course everyone can be in fantasy land. But talking from your own experience gives them a little window into what you're like as a person, what you're like as a potential colleague. So do use jobs.ac.uk or other platforms to find those questions. The other thing that I can offer is mock interviews. So if you can't find someone locally to do a practice interview with you using some of these questions, then by all means contact me and we can set one of those mock interviews up. That's very easily done. Okay, so I'll just wait a moment and slurp my coffee, which was sadly going cold. If there are any questions, pop them in the Q&A. And just while you're waiting for the Q&A, next week, in the Monday before Christmas, I am going to be hosting an Ask Me Anything. And so this is a chance for you and your early career research buddies to join me and to ask me anything. Hopefully I'll know the answer. I have got a lot of experience, but if I don't know the answer, then that will be something for us both to explore. So do join me next Monday for that Ask Me Anything. Same time, 11 o'clock. Same duration, 20 minutes, unless we get into a really good conversation. But otherwise, I'm always happy to have an email from people coming onto the webinar. So have a brilliant week. Hopefully you're enjoying the Christmas run-up, if that's something that you celebrate. If not, have a fantastic week anyway and enjoy this rather busy time of year. Thank you for joining me and have a brilliant week.